This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
I want to welcome you to this October 31st edition of Real Talk. We're covering a lot of ground today. It's the morning after the throne speech. This is the first time that MLAs, that Danielle Smith's government, for that matter, has sat in the Alberta legislature since the election at the end of May. And everybody was wondering, what would that throne speech contain? What would it be all about? What would be the tone of it? What would be the message that Premier Smith and her government would send not just to Albertans, but to the rest of Canada? We're going to dig into that in just a second. We're also going to speak with a man who's joining us live from Israel. His brother's girlfriend, his brother's two sons kidnapped about 3.5 weeks ago. Still no word. You can imagine how they're feeling. We'll hear their story, including, if you're watching us on YouTube, a remarkable video that Yaniv Yaakov has shared with us that we believe shows, or he said that at least this is the video that they saw that gave them the confidence that helped them understand exactly what happened. He says, when we saw this video, that's when we knew they had been kidnapped. It's a propaganda video released by Hamas. You've got to see it to believe it. That's coming up. And then freelance journalist Justin Ling. You probably know he's been on the show before. His Substack, Bug-Eyed and Shameless, a popular one. He has a piece, a long-form piece that looks back to the United States involvement in Iraq. And he talks about why you can't bomb your way to safety. It's an interesting perspective based on the personal story of David Petraeus. You remember the American military commander. Justin's going to join us coming up before this show wraps. This episode of Real Talk is presented by Danatech. And we wanted to let you know right now, if you're in the industry or an industry that requires safety training for your team, you're going to want to make sure that you check out Danatech.com right now. If you want to get your team's industry safety best training, if you're looking for the best training in the entire industry, Danatech.com needs to be your choice. Why? Because they've been Alberta's safety training leader for more than 30 years. Their courses are designed by experts with real on-the-job experience, so the courses actually make a difference on your job site, which is significant. Save lost time injuries, stay compliant with changing regulations, save money on training with Danatech. Big companies across Canada are using Danatech's WMIS, TDG, electrical, and lifting device courses for good reason. Plus, they've got a catalog of more than 150 courses across all industries. Today's a great day to visit Danatech.com to check out their courses and find out more about bulk discounts. Well, we were nerding out here in the Real Talk studio yesterday, Johnny. We threw on the throne speech. We ordered some pizza, and we settled in to see what the premier would have to say, the government would have to say via the Lieutenant Governor, Sama Lakhani, who of course appears as the King's representative in the Alberta legislature and reads the speech from the throne. So we've pulled a few moments from that throne speech, and then we'll dig into it. I'm curious to see what our audience is going to have to say in our live chat on YouTube today.
I mean, people were going off on X with all their opinions.
Yeah.
I will say there ain't no party like a throne speech party in the Real Talk studio. We really did it up. We got the drinks going. We had it on all the TVs. But I will say, I'll leave everyone's opinion to it. But number one, I will say she's a very good speaker.
Yeah.
She's very good.
Of
course.
Yeah, but it's kind of funny because we were wondering this with a few of the folks that were in here going, I wonder what it's like for the Lieutenant Governor, and she's certainly not the first one in this position, that they're reading the message from the government. They're not. This isn't their speech, and so I always study.
It's a script.
I study I study facial expressions, things like that. But of course, a good Lieutenant Governor and Her Honor Lakhani certainly qualifies is stoic. You don't perceive a smirk or a smile when she sees something she likes. No eye rolling if there's something she doesn't like. Of course, it's filled with pomp and circumstance and tradition, and there was a lot going on yesterday. But let's get to the meat of it. Here are a few moments that we think really jumped out, including right out of the gates. Johnny, we'll go with that first clip. This is kind of the Alberta government setting the tone, not just for the throne speech, not just for that moment in time that people are paying attention to, but for this legislative session and arguably for this mandate. You could say for the next 4 years. This is the throne speech version of saying, hey, Ottawa, brace yourself for a fight.
Alberta's government will not permit the federal government to inflict these destructive policies on the people of Alberta. If the federal government continues down its current path, Alberta's government will, over the coming months, introduce several motions under the Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act, detailing provincial initiatives and legislation necessary to protect Albertans from these unconstitutional and harmful policies. It is the Alberta government's position that every Albertan must have access to affordable and reliable electricity, no matter the weather or time of day, and this government will not permit misguided federal policies to risk the safety and prosperity of Albertans. Further, it is the Alberta government's position that our world will have little hope of meaningfully reducing carbon emissions without Alberta multiplying its natural gas and other energy exports to Asia and other jurisdictions to replace the world's use of coal, wood, and other high-emitting sources for energy. The world needs more Alberta energy, not less, and Alberta's government intends to empower Albertans to deliver it.
I like that. So talking about the clean energy plan, and what I say by I like that is that this is a clear indicator of where this government's going. And this isn't sort of obfuscated with a bunch of meaningless padded language. This is the Alberta government calling Ottawa's policies. You heard it there on clean electricity. You've heard the federal environment minister Stephen Guilbeault on this show talking about it. You've heard Alberta's minister Rebecca Schultz talking about their perspective on this, and Premier Danielle Smith will be joining us in studio tomorrow, and we'll get into it as well. The feds want to see Alberta on a net zero electricity grid by 2035. Alberta says we're on our way there. We intend to get there by 2050. Pretty big discrepancy on pacing. And so through this throne speech, the government is saying, number one, expect a fight on that. There was also a lot of talk about taxes, and there was a lot of talk about affordability. So Bill 1, the first order of business here, the Alberta government is introducing the Taxpayer Protection Amendment Act, which basically means the government's making a commitment to Albertans. You let me know if you think this is a good idea or not. Publicity-wise, and I don't want to call it a stunt, but as a move, as a strategy, it's an interesting one. The government's saying we're going to go to you and ask you if you're okay with us hiking your taxes. If the government perceives or basically looks at the hard facts, is looking at its balance sheet and says we need more revenue, we believe that we need more revenue from taxes, personal, corporate, otherwise, we're going to put it to a referendum. The people will decide. Now, I don't know how well a tax increase referendum would go for the people cheering for more taxes, especially in a jurisdiction like Alberta. So maybe, just maybe, this government's nailing its feet to the floor a little bit, cutting back on its options if circumstances change, if Alberta's not in surplus territory anymore. But it's also a promise that the government made to the people, and it will play well. The opposition yesterday kind of rolling their eyes at this. Rachel Notley says basically it's a gimmick. And, of course, there is a lever that the government can pull. You saw the previous premier, Jason Kenney, pull it. You can de-index income taxes and if times are tough, right, which bumps them off of inflation, and it can translate to, in a place like Alberta, hundreds of millions of dollars more per year in tax revenue. So there is still an option without going to a referendum, but the government does put itself in an interesting spot. And not just this government, any government to follow. You'd have to reverse this, and even the optics of that, right? Reversing or dialing back something that was described as a Taxpayer Protection Act would be difficult ground for a premier and a government to tread. And we don't have to tell you that costs have been up for everybody across the country. And in Alberta, people are feeling it as well. I mean, Alberta's energy price increases, we've talked about it on this show before, astronomically higher, exponentially higher than anywhere else in Canada. Groceries are up. Interest rates are up, obviously, so the cost of borrowing is up for people. And insurance premiums. You hear from people. We get emails all the time. Some folks are sending us photocopied PDF proof that their insurance premiums are up. In some circumstances, 300, 400%. Now, perhaps the most ardently conservative province in Canada, doesn't have to be a race there, but Saskatchewan, well, their insurance landscape's a little bit different, right? The government's involved in it. Same with BC, by the way. But in Alberta, there's this free market. And a lot of times free markets work for consumers. They work for the people, but that's not necessarily been the case. It's hardly been competitive over the past couple of years, and the throne speech reflected that. The government speaking directly to the big companies.
Insurance premiums are another cost of living pressure that this government must act on. Albertans can't just choose not to have insurance. They need it for their vehicles and property. And although Alberta's government supports the consumer choices and other advantages that our free market insurance system provides, our insurance industry must understand that when it provides a product that effectively all Albertans are required to have, consumers must be protected from undeserved spikes in the costs of those products. That is why Alberta's government froze auto insurance rates before the end of last year. And it is why, when the government lifts that freeze in the new year, it will also implement a series of reforms to limit increases to premiums for drivers who have safe driving records and introduce other changes to assist insurers to keep premiums more reasonable and competitive with the rest of the country on a go-forward basis. Life in Alberta must be affordable for those who choose to live here.
And of course, this government knows that more and more people are choosing to live in Alberta. I mean, Alberta is expected to be Canada's second most populated province by 2050. It feels like a long ways away, but not really. Not really. If you think about the fact that people are expecting Alberta's population to be around 10 million people. Can you wrap your mind around that? It's like 4.5. It's just under 5 million right now.
It's crazy.
10 million people.
Double.
By 2050. What does that mean? Obviously, more housing of all sorts. Obviously, more hospitals, more schools, better infrastructure. I know some people are going to cringe when I say this, but more freeways, more public transportation, more trains. The corridor discussed yesterday, rail from Calgary to Canmore and Banff. I think the Edmonton International Airport would be curious to see what the plans are as well there. You got rail going from Calgary out to the mountains. Edmonton's going to want in on that as well. What does that mean for a rail corridor, a passenger rail corridor between Calgary and Edmonton? Lots to talk about stuff like this. And I should note some of the comments in our live chat as well. It's not just the last couple of years that insurance has been going up. Kathy, watching us on YouTube now, says when I moved here to Alberta from Saskatchewan 11 years ago, her insurance went up $100 a month, more than $1,000 a year. That's a big deal. So you see the government reflecting its awareness that the population's going to grow. They're bullish on that. They're bullish on where the economy's going to go. But if the economy's going to get there, there's going to need to be certain conditions. And they perceive that those conditions can only come about by fighting with Ottawa. And so that's the way it's going to go. What was another big thing that we could take from the throne speech yesterday? I'd be curious to know who wrote it, like the actual specific person that wrote it, and maybe it was a team and maybe it was a collaborative effort, but there was kind of this tone that was taken a few times through the speech. I want to give you an example here. And talking about crime, talking about open drug use in the cities, and just kind of you can just imagine it's almost kind of a preachy bit of a vibe. It's kind of like a condescending, preachy, kind of looking down the nose. Get what I'm saying here? Johnny, let's roll it and we'll talk about it.
Albertans are done with allowing further deterioration of public safety on our streets, especially in Edmonton and Calgary. They are done with open-air drug use and unsafe tent cities, and criminals being repeatedly released on bail to reoffend. Albertans are tired of the excuses and tolerance for the criminal behavior by those who seem to think that what we see on our streets is acceptable in any way. That is why Alberta's government will provide funding to support the hiring of hundreds of new police officers and introduce multiple justice system reforms to do all that is possible as a province to arrest and put criminals behind bars.
You see what I'm talking about in that one clip there? We're tired of seeing by those who seem to think that this. It was like,
I wonder if that was the one where I was like, I wonder if that was a little hard for her to read.
It felt
because it was kind of like
snarky.
The downtrodden of the street people
seem to think it's okay to whatever. But you get the idea. The government is reflecting and sending the message to the cities that we see what's happening. And we hear you. And more importantly, they're speaking to Albertans that say that we're not moving downtown because we don't feel safe, or we're not bringing our business downtown because we don't like what we see. We're not riding public transit because we don't feel safe either. Now, some of the stuff that was announced yesterday, so to speak, has already been announced. More police officers, that's not a new thing, but there were some new developments as well. We'll talk about those tomorrow with Premier, and of course, as these conversations continue. An interesting note from Ken, who's watching live, says, how does a provincial government avoid raising taxes? We'll simply cut funding to municipalities. Let them do it. Downloading costs is a simple escape for accountability. Ken's right. And property taxes are another one of the taxes that have been going up a lot. There are some jurisdictions, I don't want to name them by name until we have a chance to speak to their mayors, reeves, and councils to confirm, but we're hearing that some municipalities in Alberta are looking at 30% hikes on property taxes. 30% to keep up. So this is something where the municipalities, if they're not going to declare insolvency, right, basically go bankrupt and let the province take over, make it the province's problem, this is something that's going to have to be negotiated. We're going to talk about the education tax tomorrow and maybe how cities keeping the education tax might work better to help municipalities get the funding they need. If you like, you can look back to our September 21st episode, our Alberta Municipalities Roundtable, when then President of Alberta Municipalities, Cathy Heron, Mayor of St. Albert, and now President of Alberta Municipalities, Tyler Gandam, Mayor of Wetaskiwin, and Trina Jones as well. Mayor Trina Jones were in studio talking about this. Now, what was conspicuously absent from the throne speech? Everybody's talking about it. Everybody noticed yesterday there was no talk about an Alberta pension plan. But that doesn't mean that that's not part of the government's plan, but it wasn't mentioned even once, which I thought was pretty interesting. Yesterday, we got into that with Erica Brudies and Cheryl Oates. If you missed that, we encourage you to check out that episode of Real Talk, anywhere you get your podcasts, of course, on our YouTube channel as well. The two of them, Cheryl, former director of comms for Premier Notley, and Erica, founding president of the United Conservatives, former principal secretary for Premier Smith, so both of them with high-level experience, senior staffers, launching their new show, The Discourse. And we congratulate them on that. We encourage you to subscribe to that on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget that the first episode of The Discourse comes out this Friday. So they'll have 1 week of activity, 1 week of action at the Alberta Legislature to comment on. And then episodes of The Discourse will be out every Friday after that. So they're expecting a big population boom. They know that with that comes an increase in crime. Costs are too high. They're worried about energy security and energy stability. Danielle Smith, I'm sure that we'll talk about this with Premier tomorrow, concerned about the reliability of Alberta and, for that matter, the nation's grid. And the Alberta government being very clear about the position that it's taking on making sure that that grid can deliver. Talking about expanding natural gas and doing everything they can to make sure that Alberta is able to power up when it needs to. If you have a question you'd like to see the Premier face, if you have an issue you'd like us to tackle tomorrow, you know where to find us. talk@ryanjesperson.com. I do want to note that there was that outburst at the very end of the throne speech. You heard it.
Like the woo.
This guy stands up in the gallery and he's yelling, I don't have it verbatim, but he was yelling, no more oil expansion. We have to stop expanding oil. We have to stop mining coal. And it got obviously a bit of a reaction from the speaker, from Nathan Cooper that was in there, and from others until he was escorted out. I confirmed with them. We thought we recognized the voice. It was indeed Michael Kalmanovich, who's a climate activist, and he's the owner of Earth's General Store in Edmonton.
Oh, yeah.
I sent him a note, and I said, Michael, was that you? Was that you at the legislature? Said,
was that really Mike?
Wanted to confirm.
I love him.
So that was him. So he went up and he had his say, and I saw David Kleimenhaga, who's kind of a lefty political commentator, longtime commentator, tweeted something along the lines of the speech from the gallery was better than the speech from the throne. I think he enjoyed what Michael had to say more than that. So there was the outburst. Wanted to mention that. Nothing wild happened, but Michael having his say as well. And you got to remember, it's not just a free-for-all festival seating in there. You have to have a ticket. You have to be invited.
No, not
to
at
the
all.
Throne speech.
Yeah.
So I wonder who planted him in there to make sure that he had his say. You can have your say as well. We want to hear from you, and our conversations on this, of course, will continue in the days and weeks to come. Before we head live to Israel, I want to let you know this is October 31st, which means it's your last day to cash in on this Grand Dog Essentials promo for the month of October. They've been making their chicken veggie raw food available for $16 off each a box using the discount October 2023. This is the blend that uses entire chickens sourced from Alberta farmers and human-grade facilities, along with a blend of vegetables. So your pup is getting everything they need. The meat, the bone, the organs provide the foundation for a raw diet. And then the veggies give that additional nutrition from plant-based sources, fiber for gut and digestive health. It's a full meal deal. Again, right now, $16 off a box with the promo code October 2023 at granddog.ca. Delivered to your door in Calgary, Edmonton, and Central Alberta. If you're trying it for the first time, make sure you use the promo code REALTALK. They'll knock 10% off your first-time order. Our friends at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge also have a deadline they want you to know about. That's today, October 31st. You can book a stay if you're a first responder. They want to look after you. You do everything for everybody else. It's wildfire season. We've got an opioid crisis. First responders are working around the clock, keeping people with us. And the Fairmont JPL wants to say thank you. So bookings today for October 31st all the way through till April, but you got to book by today. So you can book your trip in February, March, April, but it's got to be done by October 31st. Qualify for rooms as low as $199 a night, which is amazing for the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge. The package also includes 20% off your food and beverage, 25% off Fairmont spa experiences, and 20% off Sundog tours, including transportation to Jasper. That Fairmont spa, if you've not been in there, is an experience in itself. Well worth the trip. First responders, the Fairmont wants to say thank you. You can reach out to them directly and ask for their first responders appreciation rate. And our friends at California Closets want to remind you that around the year, through the calendar year, it's a great time to check in with their design experts. Doesn't matter if maybe you're looking ahead to the spring. You're going to do a big spring cleaning. You're going to finally purge that storage room. Well, if you want to have the setup ready for spring, for getting your space in order, you're going to want to start that free consultation process today. California Closets is transforming bedrooms with walk-in closets, kids' closets, Murphy beds, workspaces like home office. Home office options with California Closets are unlike anywhere else. They've got years of experience elevating the game, and they do garages as well. Don't forget, spring cleaning could look a whole lot different with the space transformed by California Closets. You can request that free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. Yaniv Yaakov is living a nightmare, quite frankly, right now. Just over 3 weeks ago, his brother's girlfriend, and his brother's two sons, Yaniv's nephews were kidnapped by Hamas. The family is awaiting word on their fate. Yaniv is joining us live this morning. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. Yaniv, where are you exactly? Where are we speaking with you from?
Yeah, so I'm in Danielle. Hello, and first, thank you for having me. Danielle is a small town in the center of Israel, near Ashdod. My brother was living in a kibbutz right near the Gaza Strip. He and his girlfriend were on Saturday sitting in their own house, in the morning, sleeping, by the way. And in 6:30, there was a large missile attack, a very big one this time, that was started towards Israel. At that point, my wife woke me up. I grabbed my two kids that are small and asked my big ones, I have 4 kids, to go down to a safe room. And we have around 45 seconds here to get to a safe room, just for you to understand what does that mean. It means that you have 45 seconds to wake up the kids, take them with your hands, go down to a room that is made of concrete, very thick one, a thick wall of concrete all around it. So you could be saved if a missile will hit the house or break into the house or bomb the house, it doesn't matter. And we ran to that safe room. And my wife actually called my brother at the kibbutz and asked him, Yair, are you okay? Are you at the safe room? Did you manage to go to the safe room? In the kibbutz specifically, think about it and try to imagine it. You have 7 seconds to run to the safe room. Now imagine yourself sleeping in your bed at your house and try to think how you get to a safe room within 7 seconds. In that moment, when she talked to my brother, she asked him, okay, yeah, so you are in the safe room. Where are the kids? And his answer was, I cannot go out until it will, be a little bit relaxed. So I can go and bring them. They are sleeping 200 meters from my house in another house. That's their mom's house. But as my wife continued talking to him, he said that he even cannot go out because he hears gunshots outside and people speaking in Arabic, which is kind of strange, You're in your house, the most safe place that you can imagine. While you're sitting in your house or sleeping in your house, and in this case, they ran to the safe room, you hear someone coming and shooting outside. And he told my wife, he whispered, by the way, so the terrorists outside won't hear him. And he whispered that they are shooting inside the house. After 30 minutes, something like that, at 9:30 in the morning, we got a WhatsApp message from Meirav, his girlfriend, crying for help. She said that my brother was wounded and that he's trying to hold the door while they hear those terrorists shooting. And after a couple of minutes, we got another WhatsApp audio from her crying for help, and her voice went down and down as she was whispering, "Please call the police. Please call someone."
Yaniv, I want people to know, sorry to interrupt, but people that are watching this on YouTube are seeing video right now that you have provided to us. We want to be clear what people are seeing. This is video that was released by Hamas, correct? Can you tell us what we're seeing on our screen right now?
Yeah, so you're seeing a room. First you saw the house from outside. Now you're seeing the room before the safe room, where the terrorists used an RPG missile inside the house to break the door that he was holding in order for them not to get in. And they used an RPG missile. And I can tell you that we got this movie a day after we lost connection with them. And I always say, I can't believe that that was my reaction, because my wife came into the room crying, horrified. I was sure she's going to tell me that my brother was killed. And I went outside so my mom won't see my reaction or their horrifying crying. And I saw the movie and I was actually smiling because I said, this is a good thing. And it's a sign that he's alive. And until now, I can't explain how was I able to even smile when I see this kind of thing. And I'm telling the whole world, try to imagine that. You see your brother being kidnapped, and you see people are taking him with guns, coming into his house, coming into your home. And I was smiling because that was a sign that he was alive. But what I'm afraid of, and we're seeing it happening all over the world, that those radicals are coming and doing that in other countries. Today it was here, this time it was Israel, but we really believe that the world should understand that it shouldn't happen anywhere, and we have to prevent it somehow. I don't know how. That's what I'm trying to do for the past 24 days. Tell my story, tell to the world, be careful to take action and stop this from happening anywhere else. And understand that they've taken civilians and children. By the way, the children were kidnapped from the other house. And we know that for sure because their mom, she's my brother's ex-wife, but I always call her my sister-in-law because we're in such a good connection. And she was on the phone with them while Hamas broke inside and took the boys. While they were taking the older one, the little one just cried, "Please don't take me, I'm too young." And what we're trying to tell to the world, try to imagine your kids sitting in their house, the safest place, and that someone breaks in, puts a gun into your head, and telling you, "We're taking you." I cannot explain, and I know that everybody is saying we can't imagine what's going in your mind or in your soul right now. And yes, we're devastated. We really don't know how to react. We don't know anything about them since that moment. What we ask from the world is please, please take action and make sure that the Red Cross will go in, check on my brother, check on his kid, check on Mirab, tell us that they're still alive, that they're not wounded anymore, that they're okay, and just give us some hope, because we are devastated. We are broken so hard.
I am just marvel at the fact that you're able to speak about this right now, Yaniv. I mean, you provided us with that video, but I can't imagine what it's like for you to watch that video. That's your brother. That's your brother's partner being held at gunpoint, being kidnapped. I don't have the ability to wrap my mind around how that must make you feel. What resources are available to families like yours that right now are in limbo, that are holding out hope steadfastly that their family members will be returned alive, that they are alive now, and that you will see them again? What supports are you being provided with? Is there any level of certainty that you've had? Is there communication with government? What's your day-to-day look like?
Well, I used to manage, and I'm saying I used to because in the past 24 days, I'm having a new job. But I used to manage 23 people around Israel and all Eastern Europe. So that was my day-to-day. And since that moment, my day-to-day has changed. I've taken a new job. And the job name is Free My Family. Is my role, and my role is to explain to the world again that this shouldn't happen. The strength that I get comes from my family, my wife, my brother's ex-wife, his daughter that was safe because she was in another house, and from a lot of friends in Israel. A lot of people in Israel are helping. Even people that I don't know just want to help each other, want to support each other. Because if you imagine the numbers that are in this situation, that happened in that situation, all the murders, all the killing, all the bad things, the kidnap people that happened. There is no family in Israel because we are so small that doesn't have someone that they know that either was kidnapped or was murdered or is so hard to explain the situation, right? I know that a lot of people try to show in percentage what will happen if it was another country, in percentage of what happened here. And that's to explain to the world that really this might be in every house if it was in other country, if you measure the numbers.
Yes.
And I can tell you that the government has provided us with an officer from the army that is really responsible to help us in this situation and support us with this situation. But to tell you the truth, there's no way to really support besides giving me resources that I need. For example, if I want to visit the rescued one, the one that was really saved in a miracle, his daughter, and I want to hug her and I want to hold her and tell her that everything will be okay. That hopefully they will be back soon. So they give us resources to drive to visit her and meet with her and, just support her because she is with her mom, but she is alone, her dad and her two brothers, and not with her. And for us, it's agonizing, right? That we cannot really do anything in order to change the fact of what happened. And that's why I decided to approach the world. That's why I decided to reach out to every person in the world to help us press Hamas, help us press anyone. We strive for information first. We need to know that they are okay. And second, we strive to release them and bring them back home because they're not supposed to be in this situation. They're civilians, they're kids, and they're supposed to be at home safe. Wars can happen. I'm not saying that it should happen, but wars are by soldiers against soldiers and not civilians. They shouldn't be part of it.
Yaniv Yaakov joining us. I want to thank you for showing the courage to talk about this. I'm sure, to use your word, an agonizing situation, to say the least, and that word barely seems sufficient. Thank you for taking the time, and we're wishing you, obviously, the best possible outcome in this horrific scenario.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Yaniv. That's Yaniv Yaakov joining us 24 days ago. His brother, Yair, Meirav, his girlfriend, and Yair's two sons, kidnapped by Hamas. I cannot imagine receiving a video of your family's kidnapping. I mean, try to put this into perspective. An RPG, like a rocket-propelled grenade used to blow open a door. Kids, teenagers trying to hold a safe room door shut. Armed assailants coming in. It's just, I don't even know how you wrap your mind around it. We'll continue our conversations here. We're not going to find an answer at the end of these conversations, but we hope that by speaking with real people, telling us their real stories, what their real life looks like through this horrific situation, this war, that we can come to a better understanding of what it all means and potentially how it may be resolved. Those conversations will continue, as a matter of fact, in just a moment with Justin Ling, who's going to join us. Justin's one of my favorite writers in the country. He's an independent journalist, an investigative journalist, and he's the guy behind the Substack Bug-Eyed and Shameless. He's got a piece out just a few days ago, 4 days ago. I read it from start to finish. You can't bomb your way to safety. He takes a look at American involvement in Iraq, and he applies that to what's happening right now in Israel and Gaza. That's coming up in just a moment. Friesen Brothers wants to let you know that the first of the month, of course, that's coming up tomorrow, is 15% off at all 16 of their locations across the province of Alberta. 15% off any grocery purchases of $75 or more, which is a huge deal for families that are looking to save money. They also offer seniors discount days, which are 10% off for seniors, and that depends on the store. Some of them are on Mondays, some of them are on Tuesdays. We were out in Fort Saskatchewan, Johnny, the Friesen Brothers, over the weekend.
That's
in
a great
Fort
one.
Saskatchewan. Their seniors day is Wednesday. I got to post a video of that. I took the video because their salad bar is like 50 feet long, and then it runs right up to the beer taps. It's so good, eh? The beer taps. I mean, like, unbelievable stuff. So Friesen Brothers, again, circle your calendars, friends. That's coming up on Wednesday. 15% off all grocery purchases of $10 or more. All right, we were talking to you about this backyard reveal. We've been so excited to be working with Eden Landscaping, and my wife, Carrie, you can follow her on Instagram at Carrie Skelton. Her story right now is like all Eden Landscaping. It's all about our yard, and I want to show this to you, so check this out, Johnny. So if you follow Carrie on Instagram,
I've been waiting for this.
You'll see some of our pumpkin carving on there as well. Little Noah Bear. We're behind on laundry, so little Noah Bear is wearing his Santa pajamas right now. But we're going to take you out into our backyard for a tour, right? So you can check out Carrie's stories and see it all. But look at this, friends. Here it is, summed up in 10 seconds or less. Backyard was a mess. I didn't even want to show you guys. I was so embarrassed by how it looked. All that old stone, the yard looked just brutal. And look at this. Wow. Unbelievable.
Beautiful.
New patio stone. We've got the new artificial turf in there, which is just changing the game with dogs. It's going to look so much better. We're so proud to be entertaining there. We've got some beautiful Japanese lilac trees in there. Can't wait to see those and the hydrangeas bloom in the spring. Mike's told us all about this vision that they've been able to realize here, and we were super thrilled to work with them. You can find Eden Landscaping online if you need a space transformed outside at landscapeedmonton.ca. And also, Complete Care Restoration. I'm not about to talk construction without mentioning Complete Care Restoration. They're the ones that built this studio. They're the ones that got this place looking like it does. And they'd love to do the same for you as well. Complete Care Restoration built their name. They built their business over the last 10 years, helping Albertans get back on their feet after fires, floods, the discovery of mold or asbestos. What an absolute mess. But that's not all they do. You don't have to have experienced a natural disaster to hire Complete Care Restoration, and if you're like us, wind up thrilled with the outcome. They do construction and renovation projects, new bathroom, new basement, new kitchen, office conversion, no problem. Their team of professionals can take it on. You can start that conversation today by visiting them online at completecarerestoration.ca.
New backyard, who this?
New backyard, who dis?
I see that hot tub bubbling. I'm waiting for the invite.
Yeah, buddy, you know it.
Okay,
yeah, invite will be coming. We'll do like a spring thing because I'm looking for. I've always wanted lilacs. That was one of the things we said to Mike.
December 23rd.
Oh, you're talking right now.
2:45 a.m. I'm gonna sneak in. Hey, buddy.
Yeah, we got a lock on the padlock. We got a padlock on the hot tub there, bud, because I've just got too much experience in that regard, if you know what I mean. Hey, this show, sometimes we jump around from having fun and chatting about, sort of like the lighter side of life, and then right back into the serious stuff. Our next guest has the ability to do exactly that as well. I know Justin Ling has made a name for himself across the country as a writer whose thoughts are well articulated, as somebody who takes the proper time to investigate issues, to look into stories, and then find ways to make them relevant to everyday Canadians. And that's what he's done on his Substack, Bug-Eyed and Shameless, one of his newest works, published October 27th. You can't bomb your way to safety. All you can do is create cycles of revenge. Justin Ling joining us this morning. It's nice to see your face again, man. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, what was it? So you take us back to basically the shock and awe campaign, the war on terror. I remember this is such a strange memory of mine. For context, in grade 9, I think I was at the time. And I remember I had trading cards. They were selling trading cards of American generals and soldiers and fighter jets. And it's such an interesting thing. How old were you when Operation Desert Storm and all that was happening?
Oh, I think I'm more of a product of the 2003 invasion of Iraq than I am of the first Desert Storm. I think I'm a bit younger. But it's funny, I was going to include this in the piece. I in the end left it on the cutting room floor, but you may recall that they had trading cards for U.S. generals and F-16s and whatnot, but they also had trading cards for Al Qaeda, right? They had Osama bin Laden, I think, was the ace of spades. Yeah, absolutely, and they actually handed them out. They were actually a utilitarian thing. They handed them out to U.S. soldiers in the battlefield, basically saying, here's how you confirm a capture or a kill, right? There's a card for Saddam Hussein. There was a card for al-Zawahiri. There was a card for all of these major players in Al-Qaeda, in the Ba'ath Party, in the Taliban in Afghanistan. And the idea was, if you can complete the deck, well, it's mission accomplished. We'll have succeeded in all of our aims. Will have delivered, freedom to the Iraqis and the Afghanis. And looking back on it now, it's so delusional, right? To think that you could destroy this movement, to think that you could liberate the country just by killing or capturing 52 people is absolute insanity. But yeah, that was the mentality we were in at the time. We genuinely believed that conventional military force, that traditional military tactics, that would be good enough to bring freedom to the Middle East, to destroy and degrade terrorist capabilities of launching attacks on the West, and to dislodge, this ideology of evil. And again, in modern times, with the benefit of a decade of hindsight, it just sounds so fantastical.
We reference this all the time. I mean, it's one of the most probably one of the most famous sort of on-the-spot quips from any American president ever. George W. Bush there in the smoldering ruins of the World Trade Towers, and he's there. I think it was probably September 12th of 2001 he's there. And, he's speaking into the bullhorn and the bullhorn kind of thing, and he's speaking to the people there, the rescue workers who are all like getting cancer at the time. Nobody really realized it. What a horrific situation to look back on, people working without masks. And that gentleman yells from the back, "We can't hear you." And of course, W yells back famously, "Well, I can hear you. The whole world can hear you. Pretty soon the people who knock these towers down are going to hear us." And then this cheer erupts, and obviously, because people are angry and heartbroken and in shock. I mean, the fires are still burning, but it kind of created, like at that time in 01 into 02, 03, this like green light sort of, I guess these days we might call it social license, for the Americans to basically go in and flex to try to find some sort of retribution, almost sort of like this bullish approach, and I'm talking like bull in a china shop type approach to foreign relations. And I mean, as you write about it in your piece, while it may resonate with a population that's angry or that is intent and very keen on sending a clear message and preventing something like this from happening ever again, it can prove to be an absolute disaster.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think it's a useful thought experiment. And part of, writing this was a thought experiment, given the situation that Israel finds itself in right now. It's a thought experiment to say, go back to 2001 and really think about what the world should have done, what the US should have done, what Canada, the UK, and the others should have done. It's hard, I think, to say that the right call was to invade Afghanistan and Iraq. Certainly Iraq, I think we can agree now, was a colossal mistake. But even the invasion of Afghanistan, can we say with any confidence that the world was safer and better off, and that the people of New York City and Washington and the people of America more broadly were better served by that invasion? It was an invasion that managed to not really in any meaningful way destroy Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. Al-Qaeda actually improved its recruitment in the years that followed. The Taliban have returned to power in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden, in a video message a few years after the invasion, famously said that 9/11 succeeded beyond all of his wildest imaginations. America managed to bring neither security nor freedom to the region. It managed to bring itself neither security nor safety at home. All it really managed to do was to destabilize the entire region and to radicalize a whole new generation of people who see America as a hostile foreign power and an occupier. Now, that's not to say that the motives behind the military operation were valid, not to say that the objectives were worthwhile, but you actually put these things into operation and they didn't work. Right. So you go back in time and think, it may have seemed like there was no good options, but it does genuinely seem like we picked the worst possible option on the table. For part of this piece, I wanted to go back and really dig into the evolution of thinking in David Petraeus, the guy who commanded briefly forces in Afghanistan, but more particularly was the brains behind much of the operation in Iraq, and later led to the troop surge. He was considered one of the world's sort of preeminent thinkers on counterinsurgency and basically on the ethics and governance of an occupation. His thinking has evolved dramatically. I mean, he was a guy who at the very beginning told the American people and U.S. policymakers that the U.S. military could go in and destroy Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and the Ba'ath Party and so on. He genuinely believed that overwhelming conventional military force was enough to destroy an insurgency or terrorism or local opposition. And it was with time that he came to realize that that was a complete mistake. He actually just wrote a book called Conflict, the history of warfare from the evolution of warfare from 1945 to the Ukraine war, where he specifically says, without promoting rebuilding, without promoting economic opportunity, without promoting reconciliation, without building a genuine and legitimate governance institution, you can't successfully lead an invasion and occupation of a foreign country. All you can do is promote cycles of insurgency. And I go through all of this to say that we learned a lot of lessons over the last 20 years about what works, but more importantly, about what doesn't work. And I think we should be really, really worried that Israel is about to pursue a very dangerous military operation that is not taking into account any of those lessons. I think it's a military operation that, as it's proceeding right now, risks killing a tremendous number of Israeli soldiers. I think it risks killing untold numbers of Palestinian civilians. I think it risks an enormous blowback on the Israeli population. And I think it risks destabilizing the entire region, pulling in Lebanon in particular, but also all surrounding countries into an incredibly dangerous conflict that I think we would do very well to help Israel avoid.
So what do you think, like, based on the David Petraeus school of thought, so to speak, what would be an alternative approach for Israel to take? I mean, having just experienced its worst terror attack in the nation's history, and then obviously also considering the absolute devastation that's happening in Gaza right now as well. I haven't met a single person that's like totally okay with what's happening in Gaza right now either. What's the alternative?
So it's difficult, because what David Petraeus really tells us, based on his own experience, is that if you go into a country and you start breaking things, you start blowing holes in buildings, you start using overwhelming air superiority, you start sending in ground forces with modern armor to lay waste to your enemy's capabilities of waging war. If you do all of that and you are unwilling or incapable of rebuilding and providing security and safety and hope and optimism for the people who have been impacted by that operation, if you are incapable of creating legitimacy in the democratic institutions or even potentially non-democratic institutions that will survive that operation or will be built up during it, if you cannot actually liaise with and earn trust from the population nearby, you are going to create more problems for yourself that you cannot solve. And I think that's really, I think Petraeus markets a lot of this as a way of achieving invasion and occupation sort of ethically and effectively. But I think on the counter side, it also is a stark warning that if you can't guarantee those things, you shouldn't be going to war in the first place. And I don't think Israel can guarantee those things, and I don't think Israel should be going to war. I think that is what we have learned in very stark terms over the last few decades. Israel is going to go into Gaza with a plan of trying to kill and capture as many Hamas senior leaders as it possibly can. It's going to aim to destroy rocket stockpiles and rocket launching positions. And more particularly, it's going to look to destroy and degrade as many of those underground tunnels underneath the city as it humanly can. There's a problem with that. So much of that infrastructure sits on top of, next to, or inside critical civilian infrastructure, hospitals, schools, homes. That is done by design. Hamas is looking to increase the costs to Israel exponentially as it continues this war. And those costs are going to make it impossible for Israel to work with the people of Palestine. It's going to make it incredibly easy for Hamas to radicalize and recruit those living in Gaza into their own suicidal campaign against Israel. Every component piece of this operation is going to continue the conflict in Gaza and Israel into the foreseeable future. The only way, I think, we can avert further violence, further cycles of retribution, and further attacks on Israeli and Palestinian civilians is by pulling back from the brink, is by figuring out a process to actually do all of those things Petraeus describes, building necessary civilian infrastructure, building a genuine political system that gives an alternative to Hamas, providing hope and actual quality of life to the people in the Gaza Strip. That is the only conceivable way I think that I can see, and that many other people can see, that will ultimately break Hamas's stranglehold on the Gaza Strip, that will ultimately provide for justice for those lives that were lost on October 7th, and that will provide long-term security for Israel, because the way Israel is prosecuting this war right now is only going to deepen that cycle of retribution.
We're talking to Justin Ling in our live chat. Heidi says, I really appreciate Justin's points right now. She says the violence upon violence is just going to further radicalize people. Justin says this is so interesting. Is this something that we just learned or something we're relearning? He says, it strikes me that after many wars throughout history, a big part of things after the wars were reparations and lifting up. You know, that's a great point, Justin, that he makes. Back to you, Justin. I wanted to. It's always weird to read someone's piece to them. I'll read a little bit of your words to you because I'd like the audience to hear it. If you haven't yet read it, you can subscribe to and support Justin online at bugeyedandShameless.com. That's where you'll find this piece. You talk about the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, and their 3-phase war plan. We're in the first phase now. You say second phase could begin at any moment. I know people are holding their breath there. You say, but no victory waits for Israel in Gaza. We know that insurgency cannot simply be crushed, particularly not one so entrenched or so ingrained in the psyche of a people. Even if the IDF can sweep in and kill every single member of Hamas in 10 hours, it'll have guaranteed the future of the insurgency for another 10 years. And that is a gargantuan if. And I think about, people are talking about, we just spoke with a man right before you whose brother, his brother's girlfriend, and his 2 nephews he's hoping still alive, kidnapped. I can't imagine what it's like for anybody in that circumstance, but in particular, you think of children. And then I can't fathom the death toll of civilians in Gaza. I can't fathom the number of children that have been killed. It's one of the world's great tragedies. And you think, and I see this news footage. I'm not saying anything profound here, Justin, but this is how it strikes me, is I look at footage and I see a 6-year-old boy weeping that his mother and father were killed by a missile attack. And then you think of the range of emotions, the trauma, the anger that this young man is going to grow up with and how that will be channeled. And it's like, this is not going to fix itself.
Absolutely. And listen, the people of Israel are hurting, and understandably so. The people of Israel are angry. They want justice. But the luxury of being an Israeli is that you have a democratic process. You have a political voice. You have power. You have recourse through the international courts, through international diplomacy, through your own domestic channels and apparatuses. The people of Palestine don't have that recourse. They have no option other than Hamas, right? Hamas won a plurality of a ostensibly democratic election in 2006 and has spent the more than 15 years since then killing its political opponents and seizing total control of the Gaza Strip. There is no autonomy. There's no self-determination for the Palestinian people. And to some degree, that means they are at the whim of Hamas. But to some degree, it also means they have no other choice for their frustration and their anger. When their family members die or are killed, when their homes are bombed, when their hospitals are destroyed, they have no recourse. They have no international diplomatic opportunity. They have no recourse to obtain justice, to negotiate peace, to sue for peace. All they have is Hamas. Hamas is their only option, and that is by design. Hamas exists to deny options to the Palestinian people. It exists to provoke cycles of violence. It exists to entice Israel into a war that kills their own civilians, because this is Hamas's power. And Israel needs to figure out a way to deny that power. And that's fundamentally where this has to go, I think. If you really want to do right by the people who have been hurt in Israel, if you really want to do right by the people of Palestine who want another option, you have to find a way to deny Hamas's exclusive power over the Gaza Strip. And that's really difficult. It's really unbelievably difficult. It's going to have to require dealing with Qatar, who has become one of their chief financiers. It may have to require dealing with Iran, which is one of the major patrons.
I was going to say Iran is like there's a lot of wild cards, but Iran is like the biggest wild card.
But at the same time, Iran does not want to provoke a conflict that's ultimately going to lead to potentially an Israeli or American invasion of their territory, because it won't survive it. Iran is in an incredibly tenuous position right now. Its own people are trying desperately to rid themselves of the autocratic theocracy that has destroyed their opportunity for decades. Right? Iran is not a sure thing. Iran is not in a terribly secure position right now. Israel needs to figure out how to exploit all of those possibilities in the region to promote its own security and to destroy Hamas through a political, diplomatic process. It won't do so militarily. It will only recreate those cycles of radicalization and recruitment and ideological indoctrination of the Palestinian people. It needs to figure out an alternative here. And countries like Canada can help with that. Countries like the US, the Quint, can help with that. The international community can push Israel into those more effective channels. Because the reality is, Israel does have a right to defend itself. It does have a right to promote security and safety for its people. It does have a right and even an obligation to pursue justice for those who died. But we have to be able to communicate to Israel when its efforts to achieve those goals are self-defeating and even self-harming. And I think that's what we're looking at right now.
I like how you've organized your writing, and I encourage people to check it out. You break it into parts. Part 5, not victory, but peace. And that kind of resonated with that. I sat there with this, thought about that. Not victory, but peace. And you basically say that, the only option there is a negotiated ceasefire. We talked about this a little bit. Charles Adler was on the show yesterday, and his take, basically, I mean, he can speak in his own words, doesn't need me to paraphrase, but he basically said, show me a war where there's been a ceasefire in 3 weeks. Maybe there are some small examples, but not many. The NDP, really the only federal party in Canada that's been calling for a ceasefire, right? I mean, the Americans sure aren't. The Pope yesterday on Twitter called for a ceasefire. I mean, if so, is that the American president that's got a call for it with Britain and a few others? I mean, do you see it happening? Is it possible?
Yeah. Listen, I think it's possible. I don't think the Americans are going to call for it, nor will the Brits, nor will the French or the German. Well, the French maybe. Because I think the reality is their position of power is being a confidant to Israel. And that's a really important and useful position to be in. We've already seen success from the White House in encouraging Israel to show some restraint and to pause its military operations, allowing for some humanitarian aid to arrive in Gaza. That's really powerful, and America should not sacrifice, frankly, that power. It should probably use more leverage than it currently is to encourage Israel to think twice about this operation. But the reality is the calls for ceasefire have to come from a party that is actually not powerful in the process, and that's Canada. We have really no position in the current state of things. The Prime Minister hasn't even spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu since October 8th. We're not an important player, despite what Foreign Minister Melanie Joly might pretend to suggest, like she did yesterday. The reality is it's going to require a diplomatic pressure campaign, and one that recognizes Israel's concerns instead of downplaying them. There have been groups that have called for a unilateral ceasefire that have, even gone so far as to say that Israel should start making concessions immediately. And I think it's completely fantastical. I think it's completely absurd. Israel is not going to pull back and then suddenly open the blockade and allow Hamas to smuggle in more goods to make rockets. That is just a fantastical position. What Israel can do is use the threat of military action to elicit concessions. Those concessions have to come from potentially the Palestinian Authority, from Qatar, maybe from Egypt, to allow more goods to go through the border off the Sinai Peninsula. Like I said, potentially from Iran. I mean, the U.S. has just struck Iranian positions in Iraq. They are in a good position to elicit concessions from Iran right now. I think Iran is actually freaked out. It didn't, as best we can tell from some of the intelligence that's come up publicly, it didn't fully know the extent of Hamas's operation on October 7th. It may well be looking for a solution to decrease tensions and to de-escalate the area. So there are a lot of good reasons to think that there are good processes and good progress that could be made. Israel also needs to do this with an eye of saying there can be a political victory somewhere in the future. Hamas is not your only option. It needs to give people in Palestine, it needs to give the Palestinian Authority and everybody else in the region a recognition. There are two paths ahead. One is sticking with Hamas. One is continuing to arm and finance Hamas. And that route ends in tragedy. The other is denying Hamas those opportunities, trying to take away some of that political power from Hamas. And that road ends with a negotiated two-state solution. It may not be in 2 years, it may not be in 10 years, it may not be in 20 years, but you have to give the regional players some hope that that is the end goal. And unfortunately, Benjamin Netanyahu has for years done everything he can to try and decrease the likelihood of that two-state solution. There are people in his coalition who have repeatedly talked about destroying any hope for a two-state solution. It's time for actual political leadership in Israel that puts that back on the table, that brings hope back, because that is the only way you're going to see long-term security for Israel.
Yeah, I've seen comments in the live chat about Netanyahu preserving his own political legacy here. Justin, before we let you go, I just wanted to recognize that I liked your note right at the end of your piece. You thank people for reading it. You remind them they can subscribe to your Substack and support your journalism, and we encourage everybody to do so. But you include a note that says that this was a therapeutic effort for you to get your own thoughts in order. And I've found the same thing, and I think our audience has reflected this as well, is that we're not necessarily we didn't solve Yaniv Yaakov's horrific nightmare 40 minutes ago by talking to him about his brother who's kidnapped. But I think that we provide, I hope, a bit of an outlet for him. We provide an outlet for ourselves. The audience can congregate and come together and talk about this, because I think so many people are so torn up by this around the world. And I appreciated you noting that includes you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and I've been trying to do this for the past few weeks. I wrote a sort of a treatise on the nature of terrorism a couple of weeks ago, and there was this one really instructive bit in a book by a guy named Earman Collins. He's a former provisional IRA fighter and assassin. He left the IRA in the early 90s. Went to prison for a while. He ended up turning state's witness, ended up becoming an advocate for the peace process. He describes this moment in Northern Ireland that I thought was really instructive. And it was a moment after some of the worst atrocities that had been committed during the Troubles. We often think about peace processes as coming at the end of sort of a decline in hostilities. And the reality is it's almost always the opposite. Peace processes come when things are at their absolute worst. So Collins describes this moment after the IRA had bombed a chip shop in a Protestant neighborhood. Some Protestant militias responded by bombing and opening fire on Catholic pubs and restaurants, and the death toll was horrific. The number of civilians dead in Northern Ireland was unspeakable. And Collins described this moment, I'm quoting loosely, where he says, it is to the enormous credit of both the Republicans and the Loyalists that they walked up to the brink, looked over the edge, and decided to walk back. And I thought that was really interesting, because that's kind of what we all have to do. We all have to look over that edge and think to ourselves, what lays down there? We can't just blindly run off because we're emotional and angry and hurt. We have to look over that edge, think about what comes next, and consider whether or not we want to pay those costs.
Justin Ling is a National Newspaper Award-winning independent journalist. You can support his work by subscribing.
I lost that award, so I'm actually a National Newspaper Award losing journalist.
What? Well, I got called on my bullshit there, because I'm just looking at what's on the shelf behind you, and it appears to be, what is it? What is that, a nominee page?
Yeah, consolation prize.
Consolation. Well, shit, sorry, man. Beer's on me next time you're in our studio. How's that?
That's good.
If it makes you feel any better, we've lost a whole bunch of awards on this show, Johnny, haven't we?
Yeah, just recently in Ampia. So
we recently lost 2 Ampias.
2 Ampias.
We lost 2 Alberta Motion Picture Industry Awards. So, yeah. Hey, bud, in all seriousness, have a huge amount of respect for your journalism and a huge amount of appreciation for what you do. I'm calling on Real Talkers to subscribe to support what Justin's doing at bugeyedandShameless.com. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.
Yep, you got it. See, that's a fact check right there from a journalist who cares. He calls me on it. He says, no, as a matter of fact, I did not win that National Newspaper Award.
We were both looking. I could see you straining too.
I was
squinting.
I was reading the framed photo.
I'm like, we better mention it, but then,
Well, a National Newspaper Award nominated journalist, Justin Ling. But to bring it back to the point.
It's an honor, just
bang on analysis. And I really appreciate the way that he's organized this and the way that he talks, right? It's not like this is a nightmare situation. It's a nightmare. It's horrific. Thousands of people have died. Thousands more are going to die. I hate to put it that way, but that's a fact. And I can see that the way that Justin approaches storytelling, the way that he approaches his journalism, has brought out the best in the conversation in our audience. And like Heidi goes on, she continues, says, like, when does Israel determine that it has successfully disbanded Hamas, right? She wonders, how far does Israel go before other countries step in? How many more civilians have to die before they do? I mean, I'm not we bring experts on the show because I'm not that expert, but I would say that the United States, Britain, Canada, Germany, that would never step in on Israel, ever. And so countries stepping in might be, countries like Justin mentioned. I mean, Lebanon or others, but then at risk of what? You've got American warships in the area.
They're already waiting.
I mean, it's like I can't imagine the tensions. Like we talked, for example, talking to Yaniv here earlier, and we have more interviews. We're always working on interviews and stuff happening behind the scenes. But like you think of when you talk to somebody that's there. Nir Oz that joined us a couple of weeks ago as well. You think of like the tension that they must feel. Rockets are flying and they're taking their families into safe rooms, and I just can't even wrap my mind around how tense that situation is right now.
I know we talk about it every day on the show, but it's hard. Like when we go home after and I watch the footage and I watch the news every night, it really hits home. But I love Justin's article because I think he says and he articulates what we're all thinking, which is exactly the title. Like, there is no way that one side or the other, there's no way that Israel can just bomb and bomb and bomb and then one day, like, the sky clears and the sun comes out. There is no way that you can bomb them to safety. And I like how he talked about Iraq as well. You're just making more people mad and future generations to fight and fight and fight forever.
Yeah, perpetuating that extremism. And like, I talked about the hypothetical 10 minutes ago about the 6-year-old Palestinian boy that sees his parents killed. And I saw there was there was a great chat in the great comment in the chat from somebody, I think it was Jean, who said that 6-year-old is now 26 and fighting. You're watching 2005 all over again. Aaron watching, she says he's 100% correct. It all sucks. So you can let us know what you think. I mean, we just really want to, we've had I read that email from Mahmouda yesterday that was taking Charles Adler to task, and I sure appreciated what she brought to the table. And then, of course, Adler had a chance to respond to it. Yeah. We want this to be a forum for you to know that you can have your say. We want this to be a forum, a place where you can explore different ideas. We hope driven by empathy, and insight and intellectual commitment to truth, and the pursuit of that.
I like how he put some clarity on also, like everyone's like, well, they voted in Hamas. Well, someone who's like, that was almost 20 years ago, and they've clearly like taken power and killed their enemies there who have tried to get political power. So, a kid who's 16, 17, 18 years old, they didn't vote Hamas in. They grew up in this prison.
Well, and what's the validity of those elections in the first place?
So when people, they make it like it's so recent, like we're talking about 2005 here.
Sylvia says emotions are so high between Israelis and Palestinians already. It guarantees future conflict. Netizen says, Justin Ling, what a great guest. It was good to have somebody talk about context in this situation. Yeah, I thought that was interesting, the whole story about General David Petraeus and everything. Again, put it this way, bug-eyed-and-shameless.com is where you can read the piece. It takes about 15 minutes to read it.
It's amazing.
And we encourage you to subscribe and support his journalism. I wanted to mention something to those of you that are business owners, and you could be a small business like us, or you could be a bigger business. There's an initiative out here. We're not selling you anything. This is free. Okay, this is a free initiative. It's the Digital Economy Program that's helping build the online presence of small to medium-sized business in the Edmonton metro region and surrounding areas. So if you're a registered business in the province of Alberta with fewer than 50 employees, like 49 or less, you're eligible for this program. We've done it already. It's free, and it's fantastic. Business students at the U of A work as consultants, helping business owners boost their digital literacy with how to do everything from creating a Google profile to building a Shopify or Etsy e-commerce website, or even setting up Facebook ads. So here's how it worked for us. Basically, I had a quick meeting with the team These are some of the sharpest students I've ever met. And they basically said, what do you need? How can we help? They audited our setup, Johnny. They looked at our website. They were like, your website's pretty damn good. We said, tell us something we don't know.
But
they looked at our social media. They said, social media is pretty good. We said, yeah, we know. No, I'm just kidding. And then they work. And Johnny, they put together this audit for us. And it was like a 20-page invaluable document that talked to us about SEO, like search engine optimization, and how we can better organize our website for mobile use. We know exactly, approximately, but pretty close. We know how many of you are watching or listening to or accessing Real Talk, for example, off our website, but on your phones. It has to look different than on a desktop, right? You know all this stuff. Well, we're learning all this by working with these students. This is funded by the government of Alberta in partnership with Business Link, Digital Main Street, and the University of Alberta. Now, the program runs until October 1st of next year, so you've still got 11 months to do it, but, like, why wait? Sign up today at yourdep.ca. Did I mention it's completely free? You literally have nothing to lose if you're a business with fewer than 50 employees in the province of Alberta. Visit yourdep.ca today to connect with the U of A's Digital Economy Program, quarterbacked by the U of A's Center for Cities and Communities. Also wanted to give a big shout out to our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. I'm always letting you know that they're hiring, and of course you know that they're Canada's fastest growing solar installer, but I just want you to follow them on Instagram. Their Instagram's fantastic. You'll find them there at Kubi Energy, and I know I've shown this off a couple times already, Johnny. I think I just love watching it. The video of the panel installation that they did on this new Windermere Fire Hall. It's the first net zero fire hall in the province. Look at this. The undulations of the roof, the curves, the cleanliness of that install. Really, really beautiful. That could be your house. That could be your barn. That could be your cabin. That could be your commercial building. Whatever it is, Kubi does it all. You can get a free quote today by checking out kubienergy.ca. Coming up on tomorrow's Real Talk, we hope that you'll join us live at 8:30, right out of the gates. The Honorable Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, will join us in studio. We've got her for about 25 minutes. We're going to fit in as many questions as we can about the throne speech, about the pension plan, about the fighting with Ottawa, about the deficits that municipalities are looking at, about Alberta booming to 10 million people, and a whole lot more. If you'd like to put something in front of us before that interview, send us an email right now to talk@ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk is hosted by